But before we start off, I would like the panelists to actually introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their company as well. We'll start off with you, Anas.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anas Hasan, the design director of Ru'al Madinah. Ru'al Madinah is a 1.5 million square meter hospitality community adjacent to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam masjid with a total capacity of 80,000 keys. Our target is to deliver 47,000 keys by 2030. This is a very challenging project for us. My role in the company is to lead the design activities starting from the early inception of the project up to a construction tender. So I'm leading the first program within the Ru'al Madinah with around 5,000 keys project. And everybody stay tuned. We are going very soon to construction tender. Yeah, very soon. So my passion is about the Madinah development. I have been in Madinah for 7 years, working with the top two developers in the city, working in hospitality projects, mixed-use development, transit-oriented developments, residential developments, malls. So I have been in the city for 7 years. We did a lot of work that is happening now, alhamdulillah. And very, very exciting to be with you, Suha, and the rest of the attendees.
Amazing. Moving on to you, Manuel. Would you like to talk a little bit about your company and your role?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Manuel Schneider. I'm the Director of Investment Management for Boutique Group. Boutique Group is a PIF project that was initiated by the King about 3 years ago. And we very much specialize on commercializing the kingdom's royal and cultural palaces. So, as part of the Vision 2030 and the tourism diversification strategy, we have actually we're taking ownership of a majority of the royal palaces to create an ultra-luxury tourism product for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In that capacity, I look after the business case, so creating the business case, managing the costs, and then later on developing the brand for the kingdom around those palaces.
Costs. That's going to be an interesting topic that we dive deep into. Arjan, can you talk a little bit about yourself and the company?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me here on the podium. My name is Arjan Pitt. I'm the Managing Director for UNStudio Middle East and Africa. UNStudio is a company which is founded in 1988 in Amsterdam and led by Ben van Berkel and Caroline Bos. And we are an architectural firm we design from products basically to cities and everything in between. We have been very active recently in the Middle East. Before we did a lot of projects all across the globe, amongst which we have the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, the Erasmus Bridge in Rotterdam, and of course, maybe many of you know in Dubai now the Wassel Tower, which is under construction. And of course, we are now very active in Saudi, Dubai, the UAE in general. And we focus mainly on the experience of the design, right? We go into the aspects which goes beyond just the building. And we want to contribute basically to the health of the planet, but also of the health of the people. So we want to make a big impact on the human experience and a small impact on the planet with our buildings. And I think that's the focus forward. Architecture with innovation, architecture with new techniques and technologies, and making a pleasant environment to live in, looking at mobility and all these aspects which are forming part of the city.
Perfect. And finally, but not the least, Henrique.
So my name is Henrique Diaz. I'm the hospitality director for the Middle East for the DLR Group. DLR Group, it's been in the region for more than 7 years. We are an American company with more than 1,400 people. That means we are basically across all the US, plus with a couple of offices outside of the US. my job basically is to translate the vision of developers into reality and to make it work. We are quite actively working in the region. Everyone is working in Saudi, basically. So in several projects, hospitality and mixed use. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And I know we said this was going to be a debate, but don't expect these people to like jump across the aisle or anything. I hope not, because I'm really bad at controlling violence. I don't know what I'm going to do. Probably run out of the stage. But probably we are going to start off with the first question. Okay, what do you guys hate about each other? No, that's not what it's going to be. So we're going to start off with the first question. Of course, when we are talking about spaces, you know, there are co-working spaces, hotels, hospitality sector, so on and so forth. In your opinion, I'm going to start off with the developers. What sort of spaces have you seen a lot more clients coming to you asking for? Or what are you more involved in? The hospitality sector, residential, co-working? We're going to start off with you, Anas.
I think in Saudi Arabia, different types of developments are really growing. But let's say I will talk about my experience in Madinah, for example. There is a huge demand for hospitality. For example, in the last Ramadan, in the first 20 days, the visitors were around 20 million in 20 days, in the first time in the history of Medina. So really there is a huge demand for the hospitality projects, especially in religious cities like Mecca and Medina. Occupancy rates are last year increased around 40%, I believe, and the ADR also increased around 22%. So the hospitality sector is very healthy and growing, and in my opinion, it will continue growing during the coming years. So hospitality is one of the main growing sectors.
Definitely. Yeah. And what about you, Manuel? Do you share the same thought?
Yeah, hospitality is definitely the fastest growing sector in Saudi Arabia right now. But when we say hospitality, it's not purely hotels. We're also talking about serviced apartments. We're talking about F&B spaces. We're talking about flexible spaces where you work, live. Because right now, with that much need for skill, we still have a lot of people flying in for projects. They're not there yet on the ground. It's also limited by the availability. So a lot of the supply that's there is still from the 1980s that has now been or is about to be renovated. But we have such a demographic boom in Saudi Arabia as well. Is that first, a lot of these new spaces need to be created. And we see that in hotels, we see it with F&B, we see it with serviced apartment. So this is definitely where the hospitality focus is on.
Okay, and just to go to the designer side of things, you know, obviously they did mention hospitality sector is a strong one. Now, do you see something similar? And what are the parameters of design and how creative can you get with these hospitality projects? And I'm talking specifically about the MENA region. I'm going to start off with you, Henrique, because you gave a very interesting smile right at that point.
So hospitality, definitely, it's growing. The biggest challenge right now, in my opinion, is the design of those projects, because there's a lot of history in Saudi Arabia. And there's a lot of pressure for the design to align with the region, to align with the culture, to align with the past, how things were built, and create a bit of a museum for people to understand how things were before, instead of pushing the boundary like the rest of the world. So that creates a challenge always, because sometimes the information is not enough, so that means there's a lot of need for us to go and check and try to understand the region, try to understand exactly how it was built before. So that for us, I think it's the biggest challenge right now, it's to translate that past and into a reality. And you see that happening in bigger projects like Royal Madinah, you see that in projects with NEOMs or DDA gates and all of that. All of those projects are based because they want to reproduce or they want to show the culture to the world. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
That's really interesting. Is that the same case, Arjan, that you face?
Yeah, I think the hospitality, of course, is one of the biggest drivers of the Saudi market now to attract visitors. But like you say, also that also attracts other or needs to attract other investors, businesses, and also houses to live in and places to be in. And in addition to that, that inspires also and drives basically the development of airports, train stations, and all the infrastructure which goes behind it. So actually this hospitality drives more development in the region. And I think the challenge is, or maybe the interesting part of it is, Saudi has of course a long history and a very strong heritage and culture. But we want to take that into inform our design decisions. But on the other hand, we're also looking forward ahead of now, right? With the new master planning exercises and new urban developments. How are we going to live in the future? Things we've never seen before. We hear that a lot from our clients. And I think we create kind of a future heritage for the kingdom with taking note of what has been there for hundreds, thousands of years, basically. The challenge, I wouldn't say it's a challenge because it's for an architect an interesting time to see it as a laboratory of new ideas and new developments and new concepts. I would say we develop from indeed all these aspects, from infrastructural projects to mixed-use developments, because that's a very good point, right? Without this substantiation of residential or service departments, F&B, the hospitality on its own cannot survive, right? So this is an all-inclusive kind of development in Saudi at the moment. Yeah.
Definitely, and that's interesting, because you did mention one of the key things about Saudi was that, both of you did touch upon that, was the cultural aspect. They're really trying to put forward, we know that a lot of sites have been UNESCO heritage approved and so on and so forth. So there is that element of sort of maintaining the past, but also really futuristic projects on the other hand. So it's an interesting time. But I want to go back to something, Henrique, that you mentioned, which was, sort of the lack of information that you have in building at a place that really needs a cultural uplift or, maybe renovating that space. Do you think it is maybe on the developer to give you that information, or do you think it is something that probably is, the responsibility of the designer to take into account?
I would like to say developer, but it's not the case. I think it's our responsibility to actually try to understand how things were done before, because we are proposing something. So the developer has a dream of what he wants to achieve and what he wants to have in the end as a product. But we are the ones that are going to design it. So we are the ones that should try to understand how things were done before, where to get that information, how to bring, and going back what you're saying, how to bring the past into the future, because we are building for the future. And that's why I like what you said, when, yes, we have projects like those ones, but then you have the line, and the line, it's just the future, right? So there's nothing like that anywhere. So it's our responsibility to try to understand the culture and try to understand how to utilize all that information when we are designing, when we are building a project.
Definitely, and I know we've moved a little forward, but I would like to contextualize this relationship a little bit between developers and interior designers. So I'm going to go to the developer side of things and ask, when you have a project, a new brand concept, how early do you bring the designers on board? Or should they be bought after you set the tone of the brand, or you set the idea of the brand, or should they be during the initial stage itself?
Normally, they are in the very initial stage of the project. We start understand from the investment side the strategic brief, what they want as a business case, and we build the goals and targets of this project. Then we get the technical brief from our side as a developers, and we define exactly the stages of the project with deliverables. And then we issue our RFP to the market, to the developer, for the designers to engage with us. And within this tender period, they engage in queries, and we make this kind of communication So they understand the project as much as we can in this stage. So, and then they start to be engaging with us in the process of the designer. So I think as early as possible, engaging the designer with us is very crucial.
Definitely. And Manuel, do you agree with the same statement?
Yeah, absolutely. We get the designers in as early as possible. So usually we start with the vision. What do we actually want to do? And that vision usually informs a financial feasibility to check whether or not that project is going to go ahead. But as soon as the feasibility details are set, that's when we get the interior designer on, or the architect, simply because we need to now understand, okay, how is this actually going to materialize within that budget? So if we were to get the designers in at a later stage, we would miss on the whole creative input that we need in order to create unique concepts. So as soon as a feasibility study is done and the project is a go-ahead, that's when we talk to the designers and architects.
And is there a ROID, or return on interior design, that you can calculate on, or is there sort of, some sort of quantifiable method for you to like rely on, when you go back to your, I would say, bosses and say that, what, we need an interior design right now?
Yes and no. So ROID, the return on interior design, is not necessarily a financial metric we use, but for sure there are advantages. For example, if we look into branded residences in the hospitality space. So branded residences typically are created because it's recognizable. And we have seen across the world, depending on the different markets, we're talking about a price premium of 30 to 40% with a 37, 38% average. So that is a big proponent for getting designers in and known designers into it. But having said that, it needs to still be a good design. So just getting a designer in, even a known designer, into a project doesn't necessitate a higher return. Yeah, so you can be unlucky as a developer, as an investor, and say, wow, we're going to go to these big architects and these known designers and we get them on board, and it happens to be his subprime project, yeah, and then you're stuck with a very high overhead, with a very high investment, with a very high fee that you paid this designer or architect, and you're stuck with a subpar product that you still need to now sell. So yes, there is an advantage, but it again needs to be managed.
Do you want to drop any names? No.
No.
just looking for controversy, because we can make this video go viral, just saying. No, just moving on to the interior design side of things and the design in general. When you are dealing with a brand, for example, a chain of hotels who are developers and operators, they've come to you with this new concept and you guys sort of understand the brand a little bit. How much of leeway do you have then to create a new design but also stay true to that brand? I'm going to start off with you, Arjan.
Yeah, no, that's of course we always question the why, right? That's the first thing, and that's getting back also a little bit on the brief development, the why, and how can we actually, with our creative input, can we make it a little bit stronger or get aligned on certain aspects. And then, so that is from the early stage very important to be involved in that. It's the same with brand development, right? What is we created, for example, not hospitality related, but for Doha, the Qatar metro stations, we created a branding manual, which is really looking at all different aspects of the brand itself, the Qatar Railway, and how to translate that with all the cultural aspects going along with it, plus the user experience. I think that's also one of the very important aspects in our designs, that we look at the end user. Because indeed you can get a top star architect on board, but if the architect then creates something which is more of his own or her own masterpiece, not thinking about the end user, then you basically go beyond your goal of developing something which is gets this additional return on investment or the higher return on investment. So it's all about asking the right questions to why do we want to develop it like this, and how can we then translate that, and then the what comes out of that as being a holistic project, getting to the budget, getting to the end result which is required, and that the people who visit that get the experience they are looking for and return then themselves.
Definitely. And Henrique, because you mentioned a little bit about the hospitality sector in specific, I would like to ask you, when working with brands or developers, maybe it might be a developer that you've already worked with and it's their second project that you're working on, is there any process early on that you can streamline or sort of, kind of make it a template of sorts? Is that a possibility? Because with, hectic timelines and etc., is that a feasibility thing? Or
I love workshops because that's the best thing that we can have to be sure that we're going to deliver on time and there's not going to be surprises for the clients. Because going back, we can design anything, but if it doesn't align with what the developer wants, we just lost time and money, and time in case it's quite important. So definitely workshops are important. Going back what we were talking about, bringing the architects, interior designers on board during the process, bringing the operator on board when you hire the architects, because again, if we are designing on the void, it will just take more time for us to align. Knowing the product that we're going to design, going back to your question about ID and how difficult it is to design an hotel, or if we can be creative, if there are products that there's not a lot of space for you to be creative, because there's a guideline that you need to follow, and that's it. You follow the color, you follow the design, you follow the size of the bed, and there's a bit of more space for F&B areas and for all of that. But for that, regarding ID, there's a challenge when there's a guideline from an operator. But if you're doing 5-star plus, the guideline is comfortable. That means you can propose, you can change, you can adjust. We are actually doing a project right now in Havha, and we were able to, I'm not going to say reinvent, but to redesign and create or capture what the client wanted or what the operator wanted in a different way. And there was a brief. So it always depends on product, definitely, that you are designing and the developer.
Definitely. And just moving back to the developer side of things, when we talk about, one of the things you mentioned early on was budget, setting that budget, and it helps to have the interior designers on board at an early stage, so you can set a budget as such. Now, is there a thing called staying within a budget in the MENA region, or is it always crossing? Is budget a myth, or?
You want to take this?
I'll answer this question. Actually, this is a very critical subject, the budget. Most of the project, let's say, be frank, at the beginning in the feasibility studies, it is unrealistic, and we face the reality when we move on. So I believe the right process is to start with the right benchmarking of the projects when you are starting your visibility study in the first as a developer, and put the right contingencies, and start tracking the projects in each stage in a very, let's say, focused, and make our value engineering during each stage. And from our experience, after doing the schematic project, we go back and to update our feasibility based on the project. This is the process, how we track, and we work with the investment and with the designer very positively and very realistic, in a realistic manner. Because sometimes, if we stick, the market is the reality. You will see it in the price. So this is my opinion. We should start realistic, track it, and make our home exercise together with the designers.
What about you?
It's a big topic, and I mean, we have 20 minutes. I don't think that's enough time. But budgeting in any market is a challenge. Budgeting in now a market where we don't have the necessary underlying infrastructure and systems in place is a whole nother topic. So typically we start with something we call a guesstimate, and then we work from there. Once we get close and we define a little bit more the parameters, it becomes an estimate. And then we start working on the project and with the designers and with the architects, and then slowly we're moving towards what we call the actuals are coming in. And then we have the fluctuations, and everyone here has heard of value engineering, and it is a term that exists for a reason, which is where we work alongside our creative teams to then really deliver the budgets somewhat in line with what we envision the business case to be, because that is the end goal. And I think this is where the collaboration again comes in, that we always create, from a developer point of view, we create a business case, and we always tell our creative teams, go wild, but stay on time and stay within budget. Yeah, that's kind of like the parameters. And it really is like that, because if you are working on a master plan or on very specialized projects, you get lost sometimes in the details, and you have more ideas, and you have another extension, and you have, oh, this is nice, and this would be great. And then we kind of have to put the brakes on a little bit and say it still needs to be financially viable, because most of the projects that we do are not just aesthetically nice and nation building, but they are a business, or it needs to deliver on a business case. And if we just go wild, then we can't deliver on this anymore. So there's a give and a take. But budgets are movable targets. They need to be managed, and they're better managed from an investment point of view and a creative point of view if one really sits and talks with each other. And this is where I think our role, especially over the last 2-3 years, has changed, where typically the creative side wouldn't really see us throughout the development process. We would come in on the feasibility stage, and then we would come in once it's designed and built, and we're taking the handover. That has changed because previously budgets were based on inflationary increases, assumptions of construction costs, etc. Since the pandemic, that has greatly changed. Supply chain issues, factory shutdowns. We don't get the materials anymore. We get the materials from around the world, but it's not there, and delays in here. That all has huge monetary impacts on the project. So you will much more now see a much closer collaboration of investment management, developers, and the creative side to really be more intertwined even during design and delivery than what it used to be before the pandemic.
But if I can just add one small thing, the only difference is there are two types of developers. The one that will share with you the budget from day one. And those are the ones that will help their project. Because go wild, design everything that you want, and then you come up and it's 50% more than what the developer was expecting. So it's quite important to have from day one the budget. And the second thing is, and there's a project that we were collaborating before, and you were mentioned right now, the budget was correct until COVID came. And then everything went up 25%. And that there's no more project for feasibility study because nothing aligns anymore. And then comes VEs on top of VEs, because we still need to build, right? So in my opinion, those two are quite important. It's to be realistic on the budget, and instead of having, and design the budget for 10 years, instead of thinking that the budget it's for the next 6 months only, because there's a lot of contingencies that they are not there. And just share with us the budget from day one, and we will design for that budget.
Yeah, and the budget should be built around, let's say, the ambition and the reality between those two, right? If the question is in terms of aesthetics is a Ferrari, and the budget is for something which is not a Ferrari, right? And still look at the end result being this high quality product, but then the engine is something which doesn't work or something. So it's a holistic approach in terms of the architecture, the user experience. All these elements have to come together. And that's why it's very important that developer and architects, they work together closely. So getting back to you, we're not going to have a fight here, I think.
I was really hoping for one. I know I said I'm not a fan, but I really was hoping for one. You can see I'm planting the seeds there. No, just to go a little bit back on, obviously touching on the topic of budget, we did talk about collaborating and getting on the facts ahead of time. Does sustainability or sustainability goals or the sort of amount of money you need to spend for those kind of variables, does that also get taken into account in the beginning itself, or is it later on when the interior designers come on board? How does that really work out?
So regarding sustainability, I think it is a growing trend now that all the projects goes to sustainability certification. We are in Saudi Arabia. We have now Mustadam. It is our certification body. And I believe most of the developers are looking for the sustainability aspect and certification. We in Royal Madinah had the first master plan certification as a platinum in Saudi Arabia. This was one of the major achievements for the team in Royal Madinah. And in all our projects of Royal Madinah, we are targeting the gold certification, which is one of the highest certification in the Saudi Arabia. The values that we have from having this sustainable projects and lowering operational costs for sure, the overall cost of the project will be much more less. Also, the marketability of the project and the branding of the project. This is also another aspect of sustainability. Again, in some countries we see government incentives to sustainable projects. So I believe there is a lot of values of having sustainable projects. We are working on that, and it is a growing trend in Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Definitely.
I was just to add one small thing, because I have always, every time that we talk sustainability, I always feel the same thing. Sustainability is not a checklist. And we keep using sustainability as a checklist. Sustainability is the way that you actually design the project. It's the way that you align the projects with the solar. It's where you're going to have the materials from that project. If it's a renovation or if it's a new project, are you going to use the old materials? Are you going to keep the structure? Are you going to... So sustainability, that is way better now than before, definitely. But it shouldn't be a checklist. It shouldn't be just, I'm using the right faucet. One point.
I want to add to that as well, because that's a very hot topic, of course, right? Because sustainability, first of all, you can actually get LEED certification on a fully glazed building in Saudi, right? Which there you can learn getting back to the cultural, the why. Why do we do certain things? So we can build a fully glazed building in Saudi and get LEED certification. But maybe look back to how things have been done. How can we use this information to say maybe we shouldn't build this or design this glass building, but make it more like inspired by the cultural and the heritage of the country, of the location, and then orientation of the building and orientation on the wind direction. All these aspects, these are not checklist things. Of course, there are certain aspects which are valuable to include in our designs.
Yeah, and this is the responsibility of the design team.
Exactly.
Not to make it a checklist, to make it actual sustainable project. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, you rightly mentioned about not making it a checklist, and that's such an interesting conversation because there are a lot of buildings or clients who come on board saying that, oh, we want to be, internationally LEED certified or well certified, so on and so forth, etc. My question to you then would be, do you then actively have a conversation with the developer saying, what are the ways in which you can be sustainable without really, hoping to achieve that LEED, platinum, etc., etc.?
That's a tough conversation, actually, because how are you going to measure or how are you going to explain to the client or to the developer that it's not only a checklist, right? So it's quite difficult to explain. As an example, if the client wants Carrara marble, there's no way we will convince the client that they should go with limestone because limestone makes sense for the place. It doesn't match. So that's why the checklist helps, at least, to try to achieve something regarding the sustainability, you know? But it shouldn't be only that. And we see already developers trying to, I love what you just said, you know, like building a glass box in Saudi, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's impossible for that to be sustainable. Even if you do all your checklist and you will achieve that, but you started already with what problem? A glass box. So it's a tough conversation because it's easier for developers to follow the checklist than actually going in a different journey to try to understand how we can actually design and be sustainable into the design instead of having just a checklist.
And that's why we still love the checklists.
Correct?
Look,
Go back to the checklist.
Correct?
from a designer's... Oh. Yeah, we're back. Is, you know, things we need to make quantifiable, right? The reduction of concrete, basically, in a building. And Wassel Tower is a good example of that, actually, not having a fully glazed building. It's 50-50, let's say. Using different techniques to reduce the use of concrete. These things are very much quantifiable in the calculations of the heat load, the cooling load, CO2 reduction because there's less concrete. This is, of course, also something which can be on a checklist, but things which are more related to the heart, let's say, in terms of sustainability, that's very difficult to quantify. And then you need the vision also of the client to have this buy into that narrative around that.
I mean, sustainability is a huge topic, but it makes it a little easier in Saudi Arabia because as a government entity or semi-government entities, you are mandated to follow sustainability guidelines. So nothing gets built anymore from a government-led project that is not sustainable, more so than not on the highest possible level, which would be platinum. If that's not achievable because of environmental constraints like glass, heat, sun, etc., you will go to the next lower, and that has to be justified. Yeah, so we are not talking about should we be sustainable. That's a given. That's a given. It's just about what level can we achieve and how much effort and how much time can we dedicate to achieving the highest possible classification.
And obviously, this is just, you know, like you rightfully mentioned, if it's a government project, it's not going to be built without a certification. But I think rightfully, like Anna said, I think the marketability factor, sorry, just tripped on that word, marketability factor is a little bit higher, I guess, when you have a certification.
For sure.
You know, just it seems more green finance. But is that then a conversation then you need to have with your junior designers as well on like what are the ways in which, you know, you have to organize internal workshops, just trying to understand the client requirements and with your own values and make that compromise?
Yeah, for UNStudio, it's part of the DNA, right? Like I said, we want to have a little impact on the planet with every project we do, and regardless of what it is. And I think this is for everyone in our office a given, like thinking about circularity, sustainability, be it environmental, but also social sustainability, because it's as important, of course. So these aspects, yeah, that's always part and the beginning of our design process.
Also, I want to add that within our FP, when we go, we ask for specialized consultants for sustainability to support us to achieve our goals. Not only the architects, they understand the sustainability and they work very hard to achieve, but also having the specialized consultants with us within the team help us to achieve our goals. So this is how we will work there. Yeah.
That's a very good point, especially for everyone here that would like to enter the Saudi market. No matter what product you have, no matter if you're a designer, if you're a product supplier, if you're a manufacturer, have a certification for sustainability ready, or at least if you don't get certified on a product, have a response ready. If you're pitching, if it's design, if it's building materials, whatever it is, how you address sustainability, because that question will come, especially on the government-led projects.
Sure.
Definitely. And now I'm going to piggyback a little bit to an earlier conversation we were having, which was the designers obviously sending their initial drafts. How do designers really protect their intellectual property when they are, you know, first submitting it to the developers and not really sure how the conversation is then going to move forward from there?
That's a very tough one, of course.
It's,
And it has a lot to do with the background intellectual property, right? What we develop in-house already for either different projects or on our own, let's say, research. This kind of background intellectual property is super important because that actually drives development and innovation. And we see, of course, intellectual property is a big topic, big discussion always with who owns, let's say, the intellectual property. Is it in the end the client, the developer, the owner, or is it still remains with the consultant as being the architect? There's no straightforward answer to that, of course, but as long as it doesn't stop innovation, regardless of who owns it, that this can be the starting point of a new kind of typology or a new innovation, that it can be used in other projects as well. Because otherwise this IP will stop innovation. And that's what no one really wants, right?
I think it's a bit of a tricky subject. We had a similar case recently. IP is very important, IP protection is very important, but the reality is that for smaller firms, especially smaller firms within a larger project, protecting their IP is very challenging. It's very challenging to enact. It's easier for larger established companies. So if you receive bids, even draft bids, draft designs, they should be paid, they should be protected. Does it always happen? No. Yeah. Simply because also the legal framework in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East doesn't always support that. And I think in very much more established markets, you have an easier way for being protected in that sense. But because we have such big master plans that they're so interwoven that it's very hard to define the borders. Yeah, so does it belong to the design firm? Does it belong to the architect? Does it belong to the bidding consortium? Does it belong to the client? So it's a hot topic.
I believe that doesn't exist. IP doesn't exist. We share things with developers. Everyone shares. So I will prefer to go with what you were saying regarding if it doesn't stop people to improve and projects to achieve the next level. And let's use Tesla as an example. It's shared with everybody how that works, how the battery works. So if that helps for us as humanity to go to the next level, it's better to happen instead of us losing years in battle. Because how are you going to protect that? I would love to believe that it was possible or it's possible to do it, but it's not. So how are we going to it's just going to keep creating a lot of problems. And in the end, everyone will have the information, So I prefer to believe in improving the future and improving the project. And it's better to share or it's better not to have it instead of losing all that time.
I have so many follow-up questions to that, and I have, again, truckloads of questions, which I know I've mentioned to you guys, but Ananya has been so sweetly waving to me, saying that the time is up. But before I let go of you guys, can I sort of end this conversation by asking you, because all of you have worked in Saudi and are currently working in Saudi as well, what would be your one advice to people coming to that region? And for here, we have a lot of suppliers, we have a lot of construction material experts, etc. For those people coming to Saudi, what would be your expert opinion? And I'm going to start off with you, Henrique.
Bring your A game. There's no space for you to try to figure out how things work. It's a market it's a fast market. Everyone is there. All the top architects are there. All the suppliers are there, or at least the top suppliers. So just bring your A game and keep working.
And Arjan?
For me, it's very short. Just to embrace basically the ambition and the future of a country which is very rapidly developing, and don't go in with a preoccupied kind of opinion.
Great. And from the developer side, Manuel?
I probably would have to steal Nike's slogan, just do it, because everyone is there.
Are you wearing Nike shoes?
No,
No.
no. Don't be afraid to break into that market. Book a ticket, go network. Saudi Arabia very much is relationship based. So also don't expect to do business like you used to do business maybe here in Europe. Yeah, go there. You cannot just expect to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I have this product. It's a good product. Buy it." You need to be there. You need to see the people in person. You need to build relationships. Everything is relationship based. But trust me, it will be well worth your while.
Perfect. And last but not least,
As
Anas?
they said, it is a huge market. It is the time to be there. Just be in the Saudi market, be proactive, meet all the stakeholders, the developers, the designers. There are a lot of opportunities for the business in Saudi Arabia. It is the time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I expected a little bit of more like violent answers or aggressive tones.
Behind closed
Yeah, we'll just go behind there. Yeah. Then we can air out all the issues.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much for the panelists for being here. This was an interesting conversation. And obviously, there's a lot more to talk about the projects when we talk about renovations. And now with massive projects coming in Saudi, this conversation is just getting started. And hopefully, we'll have a part 2 of this conversation sometime in the future. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for listening in.